I got asked this question the other day. Can Brock Bowers go for 1,000 yards receiving this season? He had over 850 last year. He had an incredible season. I've gotten into some TikTok arguments with people as who is the best tight end in college football. I think it's Brock Bowers, and I think that a lot of people agree that it's Brock Bowers. But something that hasn't happened in a long time, something that hasn't happened in over a decade. Terrence Edwards, 1,004 yards, the only 1,000-yard receiver in Georgia history. A couple guys have come close to it since then, but they haven't been able to reach that. And obviously Brock Bowers was not too far off last season, less than 150 away from that. Ryan Curley from Dog Post here talking about Brock Bowers and what he might be able to pull off this season. I think it's definitely interesting to talk about because this is going to be a different offense than it was last year, at least a little bit. So is it possible? I'm gonna talk about what I think. Make sure you're checking out DAWGSTRUCTION, the insider book on the national championship. It's a great read, and it's got all sorts of cool images. Make sure you're checking out our insider magazine, our preview magazine for the 2022 football season. Link down below for all of that. Can he do it? 1,000 yards. So I actually think it's kind of a more complicated question than just a yes or no answer, because we know the history of Georgia football and the run game and everything, and we also know what Todd Monken has done for this Georgia offense, and we know who the quarterback is with Stetson Bennett, and that it's a pretty healthy mixture of run and pass, but not someone that's going to go in there and pass 40, 50 times a game and just light it up. That's not the offense that they play with Stetson Bennett. They use the run game. They use the play action. Stetson uses his legs. So I think it's interesting. Here's his competition for that as far as receivers go. A.D. Mitchell is going to be targeted a lot. I think Gilbert's going to get his fair share of targets. I think Lad McConkey is going to get targets. I think Karis Jackson's going to get targets. So that's his true competition. We don't know what we're going to get out of Dominic Blaylock and Marcus Rosemary-Jacksaint and Arian Smith. And then obviously Georgia likes to use running backs in the passing game, and that's going to be namely Kenny McIntosh this year. So he has competition as far as that goes. Now, he had a lot of similar competition last year when he went for wrong number. When he went for 882, it was higher than 850. I recited this last week perfectly. He went higher. He's about 118 yards off last year on 56 catches. Okay? I think Pickens was a guy that we thought could get 1,000 yards. I think Jermaine Burton was a guy that we thought could get 1,000 yards. No one had any idea Brock Bowers was going to do what he was going to do as far as how dominant he was. I think this year, my initial answer was no. I don't think that that's really going to happen. But it really could the more I thought about it, because you would assume Bowers is going to get a little bit more attention from defenses this year, right? Because of what happened last year. But we saw that sometimes double teams didn't matter. We saw that he could break tackles. I think he's a reliable target, and I think you give the ball, Stetson after G-Day said, I throw the ball to whoever's open. There's not a target count for people. He did say that to us after G-Day, after the spring game. That was something that he said in the press conference in the tunnel. But he threw to Brock Bowers a lot. He threw to Brock Bowers more to anyone else last year. I mean, no one else had 30 catches on the team. A.D. Mitchell, Lad McConkey had 31. 31, A.D. Mitchell hovered around that 30 mark. Kenny McIntosh and James Cook, they both had in the 20s. So that's kind of what I mean as far as the running backs are going to take away from some of that, especially if Stetson needs to hit a check down. But I think because of how open this offense is going to be, and I think it's going to be a little bit more pass heavy than last year just because of what they can do through the air. And I think the presence of Gilbert, I think the rising stardom of A.D. Mitchell, I think that the fact that you have to respect those checkdowns, that we're maybe not going to see as many Brock Bowers double teams than we thought. So is 1,000 yards possible? Yeah, especially if he's getting 15.8 a carry, 0.8 per reception. Those were his numbers last year. If he's getting 10 more catches or less than 10 more catches, he's getting that 1,000-yard mark. So I think it's extremely possible, especially if Georgia plays in the playoffs, when they're in the postseason. Those extra games matter. We saw him go for over 100 yards a few times, and we saw him break free for big plays, over 70 yards against Georgia Tech, over 80 yards against UAB. Had had a really big play against Alabama. He had over 100 yards against Alabama in the SEC championship game, and we saw him get over 50 a couple other times. So he's a big play guy, and he's a guy that's difficult to guard. He's really fast. He's really strong. I think he's 6'3". He's listed at 6'4", but I think he's 6'3". He wasn't as tall as I thought when we stood next to each other. I'm a little over 6'1". I'm hovering around 6'1". So I kind of, as you watch on the field, I had never stood next to him, and then when you stand next to him, it's like, oh, he's not as tall as I thought, especially when you stand next to Gilbert and Delp and Darnell Washington. But I think the presence of all those guys actually helps the case for him, because he's not going to be... Who are you going to double? Who are you going to double on this team? All right? Because all these guys are capable. The expectation for the offense is high. Kirby's expectation for the offense is high. And I think what's great for Georgia's sake is that it's going to be really difficult to double team people, because if you're doubling A.D. Mitchell, that's less attention for Brock Bowers. If you're doubling Eric Gilbert, that's less attention on Kenny McIntosh or Arian Smith, or whoever they decide to show out there. Now, let's look at the rebuttal. And the reason for is very similar to the reason against. Well, there's just too many mouths to feed, not enough to go around. He might not even be on the field that much because they won't need him. And that could be very true, especially with the presence of Gilbert. I don't think Gilbert's a 1,000-yard guy, because I just don't think they're going to use him as much as they're going to use Bowers. I could be wrong. I think they're going to have a similar role, and that's going to be very scary for defenses, as I talked about. But I think Bowers is your 1,000-yard guy, just because it was kind of unprecedented. Stetson does like the tight ends, and A.D. Mitchell's got star power. Now, A.D. Mitchell's got star power. He really showed us. I'm not talking about just the national championship catch, all right, that put Georgia, that gave them that 19-18 lead in the fourth quarter. I'm not just talking about that catch. He showed flashes at last year's spring game in 2021. He showed flashes when he had around 100 yards receiving. He showed flashes against Tennessee, where I think he had 4 catches in a row on that one drive. Do you guys remember that Tennessee game? So for Bowers, it's like the thing that could be helping him could also be the thing that's hurting him. I think he's going to be open a lot, but there's so many weapons that you can't double all these guys. You can't give attention to a lot of these guys. But if it's going to be someone, I would take the easy money. The simplest bet is Brock Bowers, right? Because he is one of the premier weapons in college football. That is my favorite way to describe him. I think he's one of the premier weapons in college football. I think he's up there with Jordan Addison, who just transferred from Pitt to USC. He's a Blitnikoff winner. He's up there with Jackson Smith and Jigba, the wide receiver for Ohio State, who had that crazy Rose Bowl, 300 yards, 5 touchdowns. Brock Bowers is a talent like that. He really is. He may not have the numbers those guys have because Georgia's offense is a little different and they're not just dropping back in this West Coast offense. But I think they're going to take another step on the offensive side of the ball this year. And I think Bowers is going to reap the benefits of that. So 882 yards last year. If I had to tell you today, I'm going to go 9-12. Throwing that number out there. I don't know if he's going to get 1,000 yards, but I think he's going to get close. He's really good, especially as he's healthy. We know the shoulder injury. He's shoring that up. He had off-season surgery. But if there's going to be a guy, my money would be on Brock Bowers. My number 2 for that would be A.D. Mitchell. And then Lavi McConkey's sneaky in that conversation. A guy that can really get open. He's really fast. We saw him put the burners on against Auburn. But I think Brock gets into the 900s. I think he gets close. A.J. Green had 980-something in 2008. Or 960-something. He had over 900 yards. Torres King had 950 in 2012. So guys have gotten close. I think Brock Bowers is going to hover around that number. Let me know what you think down below. And make sure you're checking out DAWGSTRUCTION. And make sure you're going to dawgpost.com. And make sure you're checking out our TikTok at DAWGPost. I am going hard on TikTok. See ya.